Okay, continuing in chapter 15, we shall overcome. It's going back to the story of LBJ, but it's still January 73. It says LBJ, well, it's retrospective, but looking from the point of January 73. LBJ had agreed to a series of television interviews with CBS shortly after he left the presidency. The first was filmed in July of 1969, 11 days before Apollo 11 took off for the moon. This interview covered Johnson's contributions to the space program and was scheduled to air on the day that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin landed on the moon, which turned out to be the same weekend, I did not know this, of Teddy Kennedy's car accident at Chappaquiddick. Though financial terms for the TV series were not disclosed, it has been reported that Johnson had signed a whopping $1.5 million deal with a CBS-owned publishing house for his memoirs. And for that time, that's a huge amount of money. It says, his presidency had been born out of violence, the unthinkable assassination of a popular and youthful president, a cruel and shocking act, as Chief Justice Warren's commission labeled it. Okay, I didn't put two and two together that Chief Justice Warren Burger was the Warren of the Warren Commission. Got it. The grief and trauma for the nation proved nearly unbearable. And here's a picture of LBJ. And it's while filming a CBS special, December 1971. Now, interestingly here, in his second interview with Walter Cronkite, and I think I forgot to mention in an earlier chapter, I must have missed the page. It became nearly certain that LBJ did bug Nixon. Maybe it wasn't his plane, but somewhere in his campaign, it was bugged. And Nixon decided not to use this information because the potential blowback for him on the whole treason thing would have just been too great. They were both holding loaded or grenades with the pin taken out, and it would have been mutually assured destruction. So in his second interview with Walter Cronkite, this one in September 1969, LBJ spoke of the Kennedy assassination and in an unguarded moment said, "I can't honestly say I'd ever been completely relieved at the fact that there might have been international connections." Johnson had become convinced over time, based on briefings by the CIA and the FBI, that the Kennedy-backed CIA plans to assassinate Castro with mafia help after the failed Bay of Pigs had provoked a retaliatory move by Castro against JFK. He remained reluctant, however, to go public with his doubts. After the Cronkite interview, and under pressure from his advisors, LBJ asked CBS to remove the part of the interview in which he spoke of his suspicions of international involvement in the assassination, and CBS reluctantly complied. According to LBJ friend and legal advisor Arthur Krim, Walter Cronkite blew his stack but deleted it. Johnson later told Leo Janos, a Houston journalist who worked for Time magazine, that he never believed that Oswald acted alone, although I can accept that he pulled the trigger. Johnson said to Janos that when he took office, we had been operating a damned Murder Inc. in the Caribbean. Janos did not print Johnson's report until after he was dead. Interesting. And then it's starting to talk about LBJ's work in getting civil rights passed. He said, "I believe that the essence of government lies with the unceasing concern for the welfare and dignity and decency and innate integrity of life for every individual." And at a civil rights consortium, I believe this was after he left his presidency, or right around that time. Oh, actually, it says here, no, this is some earlier comments, but we're going to deal with some comments at the consortium. But he said it's at the consortium talking about something that happened earlier. Got it. He reminded the participants And this consortium was in 72. All right, I'm getting the dates straight. So right before he died, but in Nixon's presidency. He reminded the participants of the conference of his words a decade earlier at Gettysburg, before all the changes of the 1960s. Until justice is blind to color, he had said in 1963, while standing near where Lincoln once stood, until education is unaware of race, until opportunity is unconcerned with the color of men's skin, emancipation will be a proclamation but not a fact. To the extent that the proclamation of emancipation is not fulfilled in fact, to that extent we have fallen short of assuring freedom to the free. To be black in a white society is not to stand on equal ground. While the races may stand side by side, white stand on history's mountain and black stand in history's hollow. Until we overcome unequal history, we cannot overcome unequal opportunity. I'm not going to make any commentary on where I think the fruit of some of that thought is. You can't overcome history. History is what it is. You could recognize it. You can seek to remediate it without violating the rights of people making the children guilty for the sins of the father, but you can't overcome history, in my view. And he concluded, but it is not just Negroes, but really it is all of us who must overcome the heritage of bigotry and injustice, and we shall overcome. And then chapter 16. I want to do this job that Lincoln started. I want to do this job that Lincoln started, and I want to do it the right way, Johnson said to, I believe this was Thurgood Marshall. Yes. I want to be the first president that really goes all the way. And then it says, Lyndon Johnson sought to be the first president to appoint an African American, the grandson of a slave, to the Supreme Court. And he arranged it so that he could appoint Thurgood Marshall. But to Southerners, at least, they opposed Marshall as a judicial activist. Thurgood Marshall, for one, saw the right to an abortion as especially important for poor and underprivileged, and this was his main reason for signing on to the viability notion. He said, given the difficulty with which many women may have in believing that they are pregnant and deciding to seek an abortion, I fear that the earlier date might not in practice serve the interests of those women which your opinion does seek to serve, he wrote to Blackman. It says here, and this is again still dealing with the development of the opinion in the abortion cases. The decision here to break the term of pregnancy into 3 distinct terms and to outline the permissible restrictions the state may impose in each one, for example, partakes more of judicial legislation than it does of, I want to see who wrote this. This is the dissents. These were the dissents that were circulated around than it does of the intent of the drafters of the 14th Amendment. And that was Rehnquist. Then it says Byron White, appointed to the bench by John F. Kennedy, expressed the only direct concern for the fetal life. The court, for the most part, sustains this position. During the period prior to the time the fetus becomes viable, the Constitution of the United States values the convenience, whim, or caprice of the putative mother more than the life or potential life of the fetus. With all due respect, I dissent. And it seems like he thought it should be left to the states. And it bounces back to the developments in the Watergate trial, where the Cubans had somehow leaked out that they were still on the payroll for the re-election committee. And McCord was becoming inflamed that people like Jeb Magruder and John Dean had walked free while he faced a long prison sentence. But none of these things really took hold, because the article that broke it, I believe this was in the Times, it had some facts in it, let's put in quotes, facts in it that were clearly wrong, so that the article ended up collapsing on its own weight. And it notes in here that this was a bullet dodged by the White House. And then it bounces back because everything this month is so tightly entwined to the Vietnam negotiations and the loss of patience with the South Vietnamese leader, Theo. So chapter 17, we should wait for his formal reply before popping corks. The formal reply is Theo, as to whether he was going to get on the train or get in front of it, because it was made clear to him that the United States is settling this thing. He can agree or not. And it is at this point that the Cubans change their plea to guilty. And Sriracha continued what he tried with Hunt, and the Cubans didn't have quick counsel to object, where Sriracha was trying to get them to say on the record what higher ups, incited you to do this, but they cleverly dodged the questions. They claimed they did it just because it was the right thing to do. They were really concerned as to what they saw as JFK's betrayal of the Cuban people, or the cause for freedom in Cuba in the Bay of Pigs, and thought that the U.S. government was turning out to be supporting Castro right when Castro was ready to fail. And it says, literally, at roughly the same time that George Sriracha recessed for lunch in Washington, the administration announced in Key Biscayne that the United States was suspending offensive actions throughout North Vietnam because the ceasefire negotiations in Paris were progressing. And this is where they started playing very hardball with Theo. And Haig, who was the ambassador to Vietnam, was sent letters back and forth playing hardball with Theo. And even though he believed that Theo would fold, he wrote to Nixon, "We have been fooled before. I think we should wait for his formal reply before popping corks." And Nixon was also writing and preparing for his inaugural. And his twin themes for his inaugural would be the creation of an enduring peace in the world and a shift in the way people saw the role of government at home. Government, he asserted, was not the solution to every problem. He wanted a government that would take less from the people so that the people could do more for themselves. Sounds good on paper, but we know from the history of the party we've been reading, he did not live up to that lofty principle.